Hey, Don't Die Rusty Nation. We have another great episode of the Don't Die Rusty podcast, and I am here with Ricky Brule. How's your weekend been, man?
It's been good, man. Yeah, not too bad. It's been fun to kind of relive this episode. We recorded it, before the end of the year, and it was one of the first ones that we did. Based on the conversation, we were kind of waiting, like kind of strategically, to put it out right around this time. Pretty excited to put it out there for all of the Don't Die Rusty Nation to listen to.
This conversation, I mean, we go in many different directions. I think it's more than just entertaining, I think it's enlightening. We aren't doctors and we aren't experts in the fields that we talk about, but we are kind of experts in the field as we live this life. And what is an expert? Is it schooling or is it living the true life that you've been lived?
Yeah, it's really cool because right in the beginning you make mention of us having a lot of like you feel like we have a lot of things in common, right? And then once we start diving into the conversation, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, we actually have a lot more in common than we thought, and like on a pretty deep level. So it's a great episode. It was a lot of fun to record, and we actually ended up having such a good conversation. I think we talked for more than 3 hours.
We did. We had that technical difficulty in the beginning, in the middle there,
Yep.
and which was fun. It's kind of funny to think about because you were on like a 10 or 20-second lag, and Paul and I are looking at each other like, is he going to talk or laugh or have any emotion or anything like
Yeah.
that? It was hilarious.
It was tough. It was tough because every time you guys would say something, and then I would laugh, but my laugh wouldn't come through on your end for about 10 seconds. So you guys would just be sitting there talking, and all of a sudden my voice would come barreling in with laughter at the most random times. And then it was kind of vice versa too, where I would try to say something and then I could tell there was a delay, so then I would just keep quiet and there was no way for me to like interject. So we finally identified the issue and then we reset. We backed out, came back in. That's it's the pains of streaming, the way that the way that we have to do with you being out in the Black Hills and me being in Minnesota, but it all works out. So
We fixed the technical difficulty. We went and had bathroom breaks and got a drink, kept the conversation going, and
it was like a hard reset, right? So we have part one is very separate from the conversation that we had in part two. So we did decide to take this episode and split it up into two parts, and so we're gonna dive right into the first part here, and we hope you all enjoy it.
welcome to the Don't Die Rusty podcast. I'm Rick Hanson, and we will be talking about living, not dying. We're all in this adventure together, and we will be interviewing people who inspire us to live our best lives. People with various backgrounds who will walk us down the trails they took to not die rusty. Adventure in life are many things to many people. It could be a sprint or an endurance race, but with each adventure, we become a better version of us. We hope you keep chasing those dreams, being the best you, and of course, don't die rusty. You want to get started?
I thought we were already
Well,
started.
we are. I was just going to say welcome to the Don't Die Rusty podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, both you guys.
I mean, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
was. It's good to have people that I know and have done a few things with, and Ricky and me and you have, I think we have a lot of the same perspectives on life in some aspects. You know what I mean?
Oh, good. Yeah, that's always good. Like-minded, it's fun.
It's about living life and enjoying what's out there. Let's dive in. Let's talk about you. This is Paul Eric, and he's a man of many talents.
Yeah. Master of none. I'm Jack of all trades, master of none. That's the way they like to say it. I always find it hard to talk about myself. Getting to know people like through this channel of like, hey, tell me about you and what you're up to and stuff like that.
Well, I know that you we talked about your car wash as a kid. You
Mm-hmm.
grew up in El Paso, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
How was the life growing up in El Paso, Texas?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's hot out there. El Paso's dry and dusty. I don't know, Ricky. Where are you from?
Uh, Born and raised Minnesota.
Oh, cool. Okay, very cool. And Rick, you were born and raised here in South Dakota?
In South Dakota, I grew
Okay.
up in central South Dakota. I grew up on a ranch.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Cool.
yeah, so grew up on a ranch and lived there all my life, except when I came out here to college. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So El Paso, man, born and raised there. It's on the border of Mexico. A lot of people know us for that. Paso del Norte.
Hmm.
Um, you would expect me to speak Spanish, being on the border. I don't speak Spanish. I can understand it enough to get some tacos, but yeah, just grew up there. Dad's a cop.
Uh-huh.
He's been a cop since my mom was pregnant with me. That's the year he
Mm.
joined the academy. He's still a cop in El Paso. His brother, my uncle, is actually chief of police out there. My dad's a big time. He's a senior negotiator, crisis management team. We talked a little bit about that already.
Yep.
So I grew up in that law enforcement family household. Dad was always on call. El Paso, though, if we want to talk about the city, it's an interesting one. Believe it or not, there's phenomenal mountain biking there. A lot of people don't realize that, but you can ride year round. It's nice. You can get up to 6,500 feet in elevation, something like that, on a bicycle on the trails out there. And that's a lot of my background. I raced bicycles. I started riding them in El Paso. Yep.
So you started riding mountain bikes, and then you were you a pro?
Yeah, it's an interesting story on mountain biking. So, um, I went on to win the Texas Marathon State Championship in my age category. At the time, I was racing 19 to 29 years old. I did because I lived in El Paso. I could race New Mexico's off-road mountain biking series, which was NMORS, and actually a state champion there as well. So I had concurrent titles with New Mexico and Texas at the same time because living in El Paso, I was closer to the New Mexico races than I was to the Texas races. And actually, that's a fun story for me because I started riding bicycles as a kid. That was my way of getting around. My parents had a very modest income with my dad being a police officer, my mom stay at home mom. So yeah, if I wanted to go somewhere, I was either walking or riding a bicycle. I was a Boy Scout for many years, and one year at summer camp, they had a mountain bike program. So I decided to ride the mountain bikes with the bigger kids and scouts. Had a lot of fun doing that. And that was in New Mexico. And then I guess when I bought my first non-department store bike, see, my parents used to buy me a bicycle for my birthday and a bicycle for Christmas, and I would
Hmm.
destroy both of them. They were the Walmart bikes, if you will, and those things didn't last between the seasons.
Hmm.
So when I finally got a real mountain bike, I remember I had a buddy in high school. His name was Nick, and Nick was working at one of the bike shops, and I had been washing cars, and then I started selling cars, and I saw some pictures of my friend riding his bicycle in what would be the Franklin Mountain Range in El Paso, and Tom May's unit, and I was like, man, that looks really cool. Like, I want to try that. And so I went and I talked to him, and I bought a bike, and then I was like, hey, I bought this bike. Let's go ride. He's like, nah, dude, I'm not letting you come ride with me until you learn how to ride that thing, because like, I guess he didn't want to stop and wait for me on the trail and whatever. So that was fun, and then I really took to it. I started racing. I My first race, I think I finished ninth place, something like that. And then, man, I was addicted to it. Like, I got hooked, and there's something always like challenging about a mountain bike. All the terrain is different all the time. Yeah, you can ride the same trail every single day, but the trail is always changing, so it's
Hmm.
never the same in reality. Um, but what pushed me into mountain bike racing was this girl that I was madly in love with. She died in a car accident, and that was on a Monday morning. I was sitting at work. I was selling cars at the time, and I met her while I was selling cars, and had this crazy romance. And thing about this girl, and her name's Elena. She's tattooed on my arm here. Thing about her was she's the first girl that was like, "Hey, I'm in love with you." Like,
Really?
to me, without me being like, "Oh, I love you," and like ruining that, because I told you already, I've got ADHD, Ricky, and I've been diagnosed ADHD since I was 7. So like, I grew up on Ritalin, and I'm always the kid that was like always too much for everybody. And this one girl, like, for whatever reason, I never told her I loved her first. I couldn't tell you why, but fuck, I love that woman. And yeah, one night after we were out doing some wild stuff like we always did, we went our separate ways. She pulls up next to me and rolls down the window of her car. I roll the window down on my car, and she looks at me and she goes, "Hey, Paul." And I look over at her and I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Hey, I love you," and then she just peels off. And I was like, "What the fuck? This is the first time this like a girl's ever told me she loves me." So anyway, Elena played a big role in my life and was a big catalyst for what I went on to do with mountain biking because she died, and that was a crazy thing to go through. Like we had spent New Year's together, and January 4th rolls around, and man, I remember when her brother first got a hold of me, I thought he was just like kind of bullshitting me. It was just crazy. Like I was like, "You're kidding! Like we got in a fight on New Year's Day. Like I know, like don't be that dramatic. Like she didn't die in a car accident. What are you talking about?" It's pretty interesting to go through that shock and stuff. But that moment in my life pushed me to ride a bicycle like nobody's business. I went from just a sport rider to what's called Cat 1. So you asked about being pro, and it was a transitional time for USAC. So like you had to get certain points to cat up to pro, and then they changed the way they ranked it and went from like sport, which would have been the I guess an amateur racer, and then semi pro, and then pro, and then they just looped it all into one pro, and it was Cat 2, Cat 1, pro. And in order to get pro, you had to race and you had to get the points. And so I went out the year after the year she died. Um, I had just been a Cat 2 racer, and I catted up to Cat 1 to go to nationals. And I earned my nationals spot as a Cat 2, but I went to nationals and raced Cat 1. It was a complete fuck up. I should have never gone up to Cat 1 after ranking in Cat 2 because at that time I wasn't training properly. So I
Yeah.
went and I raced way out of my field. At nationals, I finished like 11th and 12th, and it was in Idaho, and yeah, it kind of ruined me. But anyways, her dying made me take out every little bit of grief I had on the bicycle. So like every day I'd get on my bike and I'd go ride. And I'd always have this like mindset of like, she's at the top of the hill. The faster I get there, I'm gonna see her. Like I'm gonna crush this climb. I'm gonna get up this. And that took me to going into endurance racing. I went from, oh, I'm gonna race these 25-mile races to suddenly I want to race these 50-mile marathons. And the year I went chips in on marathon racing, I went to 5 of 6 races in the state of Texas, and I won all 5 races I showed up to.
Really?
Yep. Yep.
Holy moly.
And that got me. I've got the jersey. It's still hanging in my closet every year. I'm like, I'm going to put this in a frame, but it just sits there in the closet. So yeah, mountain biking.
Wait, that's interesting in the fact that I was talking to Ricky I think it was yesterday, and there's a song that says sometimes you need to die to live.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds like to me like you took out her dying and you just kept on moving up the mountain and kept on moving and moving and moving. Am I wrong on that or?
No, you're hitting the nail on the head there. There's a song by Placebo, "Running Up That Hill." Recently gained like TikTok notoriety. People took the remix and started doing stupid like dance videos with it or whatever.
Yeah.
But I used to ride with these Oakley Thumb Pros, and they had the speakers, the earbuds like built in. Now it was technically illegal to ride with headphones during these races, but I figured out I could wear these sunglasses and stick these earbuds in, and I mean the music would get me going, and that was one of the songs, "Running Up That Hill." And it's like if only I could make a deal with God, I'd be running up that hill. We could change places, because learning to deal with grief. I mean, I was 23 at the time, and learning to deal with that kind of grief, you know, I, that's a tough thing to go through. A lot of people I don't think come back from that. Man, I lost my job. I got evicted from my apartment that I was living in. I had moved out real young. I was living on my own, and I was selling cars, and I met her while I was selling Saturn vehicles, and then Saturn got killed by General Motors, and then I come from a modest background, and I've got 2 siblings where I come from, and so this girl, her dad was a doctor, and I was like, shit, man, her dad's a doctor, like she expects a certain level. So I left the Saturn store and I went over to BMW, which is wild. I sold Mini Coopers actually at the BMW store, and her and I got in trouble one night because we decided to go fool around to celebrate my new job in the parking lot. Freaking security guard knocks on the window and it's all crazy shit. I got in trouble my first week on that job. They're like, "We heard you were here after hours," and I was like, "Oh fuck, I'm gonna have to deal with it." So, but dealing with grief, it pushes you. So like if I dealt with it in like, hey, I'm gonna get on my bike and I'm gonna go ride, and I mean 50 miles doesn't sound like a lot, but recently I did the Dakota 50 up here.
Yep, I saw that.
And I gotta say, back in 2010, 2009, and I started riding in 2007, and I think I rolled up to my first race in 2009, and then yeah, by 2010 I was a 3-time state champion towards 2011. But at any rate, the Dakota 5.0 was in magazines. It was like that was back when you'd flip through actual magazines. Social media was this newfound technology, and
Mm-hmm.
very few people really knew what it was. But Dakota 5.0 was always in there. That and like the Iceman, which I think is in Minnesota or Wisconsin, somewhere nearby, where they race in the wintertime. But I always wanted to do the 5.0, and then I find myself here in Spearfish, South Dakota, where the Dakota 5.0 is. And the first time I found that out, I was like, oh man, God, it's been years since I've been on a bike. And so I got a bike. I'm like, I'm gonna go ride the 5.0. I'm gonna race the 5.0. And back then I was fast.
Mm-hmm.
I could finish a 50-mile race in Texas, and I think my fastest was 3 hours 45 minutes, something like that. So I'm like, I got this. Dakota 5.0 that's a burner, even in peak form. I can't imagine. I can't imagine placing top 10 in that race, even in peak form.
Really?
Oh my God. It's nothing but it's single track. For everybody's always like, oh, our race is all single track. It's 95% single track. You go to that race and there's like 10 miles of Jeep roads. No, this ain't single track. The Dakota 5.0 is 95% single track. I mean, you're on very few Jeep roads. And the single track it's brutal. It's the I mean, I think the guys that won the race this year, they didn't beat the record, but I want to say they were right around 4 hours and 5 minutes. That's stupid fast for this track. Like,
Well, I mean, I've been on parts of the track,
mhm.
the race course here and there. I'm certainly no pro bike. I'm not even probably a good rider, because that's why I like to hike, because I have to watch where I'm going, and I've been over the handlebars way too many times. So
It'll get you.
you know what I mean. And I thought, I want to look around, and you have to look where you're going. I mean, that's with everything, but I mean, hiking, at least I can kind of lollygag and see things. That's my personality. I think I like to look at the little things. And on the bike, I would rather I I'd rather go up to uh Bridal Veil or be somewhere where I don't have to look around, but you get on a single track, I got to watch what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. If you get, I mean, I've crashed out here a lot, and historically was not a big crasher on a mountain bike, but up here in the woods, in the Black Hills, if you will, yeah, every time I ride, I end up with like pieces of tree in the end of the handlebars. I'm like, man, I grazed those trees. I was getting
Mhm.
really close to them, and like, yeah. So I feel you on that. I mean, but I can't hike. I try to. I set out with like good intentions. I'm like, I'm gonna go hiking today, and then I'm like, I want to go fast. I want to get up the trail as fast as I can, and I can't run. So
And I don't. It's interesting because Crow Peaks, just we see it when you came. You know what I mean? And when I climb that, my challenge is sometimes how fast I can get up, but there's other times, like I did it 3 times in one night.
3 times in one night.
Yeah,
Damn.
but those are the challenges you have. And but the mountain biking, like I said, is just I have to watch where I'm going. But I
Yes.
understand your challenges, and I understand some people everybody's different.
Yeah, so pulling that back to coming alive, if you will, again,
Yeah,
like, yeah, I fell into some really nasty parts of my life. Like I was drinking, I was depressed, I was living back with my parents. Like, shit, one night I broke the mirror or the windshield in my car from the inside out because I saw myself in the mirror and I was so disgusted with what I saw. And like,
really.
yeah, it was a bad night. I just got into the booze, and I was dealing with Elena dying, and fuck, and then my dad had to drag me out of the car. I was so pissed off. I was in the front yard. I did some dumb shit, man. Like, you go to the bar, you get sauced up, you want to fight people when you're pissed off with the grief, and like, so mountain biking was where it was at for me, and that pulled me to the next level of my life.
And where'd you go then?
So back then, I left car sales and I pursued mountain biking full time.
Uh-huh.
I had always had this dream that I wanted to own a car wash. Crazy dream. When I was a kid, I washed cars. I would walk around with a bucket and a backpack on the weekends to make some side money, if you will, like just to have some allowance money. And that rolled into detailing cars part time. And I started a mobile car wash, and I worked part time in a bike shop. And I worked part time in the bike shop so I could get the pro deal on the bikes, and then I could work on my bicycle, and I kind of immersed myself in the bicycle culture. I became a fit specialist, like so I could fit you on your bike. I worked with a company called Retool and their stuff, and had a lot of fun doing that, washing cars. Went into mountain biking, and then that introduced me to um, the guy that introduced me to the people that would go on to start Black Rifle Coffee Company. So like mountain biking put me in front of the person that introduced me to that in this crazy way. I had Craigslist. I bartered some services on there, and everybody's like, was like, "Oh, Craigslist, that's for weird shit." And like, in the beginning of Craigslist, you use that for business. And I figured out how to write code on Craigslist and have like these beautiful flyers and whatnot. And I traded my services. So I was bored. I'm like, how can I get some like do something different? And I traded, and I met this person who had a airplane business. He did scenic tours of El Paso through a biplane. So this really cool Boeing Stearman biplane, open cockpit. He's like, "Hey, I'll trade you a detail on my car. It's a Subaru Outback for a ride in my airplane." I'm like, "Oh, that sounds freaking cool. I'm all for that." So I show up to his house, and he's got posters of road and track and dirt and motorcycle posters on the wall. He's got this old rusty mountain bike hanging up on the wall. And I'm like, "Oh shit, I gotta talk to this guy. He seems cool." And so I'm like, "Hey man, you got a mountain bike? Like, no, not to brag, but I'm the king of the mountain in this area, like on Strava, you know." And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm that guy." He's like, "Oh, it'd be cool to ride with you." So I start riding with this guy, and yeah, well, a couple months go by, and he calls me up and says he met somebody, and that I needed to meet them. All the while, I was starting my second business after the car wash and the whole mountain biking chapter of my life. I started a bubble tea business. I found the stuff while I was traveling, racing bicycles, and for those of you that don't know, bubble tea, it's a tea drink with tapioca pearls in it. Really good, really weird at first because you're drinking it up and it's got like these balls in it. And you're like, "Why are there balls in my drink?" And but I I couldn't find any in my hometown that were good. Like the ones that I went and got, they sucked. So I kind of made it my mission. I was like, I want good boba, and it's boba bubble tea, same.
Yep.
So I made it my mission to I'm going to start a bubble tea business, and I did. And I opened up my first store inside of a mall, and I was partnered up with a girlfriend at the time, and we started this bubble tea business, and that's where mountain biking took me. It took me to that level. Like went from washing cars, racing bicycles to handing over the car wash to my brother and stepping into this bubble tea business. Still thinking I could race bicycles. The whole time I wanted these businesses was that so I could focus on racing bicycles. Turns out when you're self-employed, you actually lose time. Like you don't gain the time that you think you're going to have it. Not in the first few years. It takes a while to build into that cushion of like I can go off and do some stuff and step aside and everything's going to be fine. It's interesting how that works out. But so the bubble tea business that starts to do well for me. I win like best new business in the city, best entrepreneur under 40. I think I made top 3 lists like 4 times for that. And that introduced me roundabout way to the guy that flew airplanes. He introduced me to the guys that started the company, Matt Best and Jared Taylor. These were some military guys that were in my hometown, and they had these ideas. I met them, went over to Jared's house, hung out with them, had some booze, had a good time with these guys, got to know them. And man, Ricky, I was telling Rick earlier, this is way before the coffee company. These guys had a company called Article 15 Clothing. Um, Real slapstick funny YouTube channel and just crazy content that Matt and Jared would come up with, and Rocco, Vincent Vargas. And so I got mixed up with them real early, became friends, and started hanging out with them and kind of seeing what they were doing with YouTube and whatnot. And here I am, this budding entrepreneur, and here these guys are. They want to get out of the military and do something. And so off that came like Drinking Bros podcast. And I mean, I was there probably, it would have been, I think 2012, something like that. But anyway, from seeing the garage floor and Jared Taylor on like a single Mac to building into what Black Rifle is today. And yeah, so that's where kind of like the whole mountain biking, and that I don't know if I was riding bikes if it would have gone that direction.
Well, that is, I mean, things happen for a reason.
Yeah, they totally do.
The timing and everything. Like Ricky doing a podcast with me up in Terry Peak, and now we're here for the Don't Die Rusty podcast.
Yeah. No, and this whole Don't Die Rusty thing that you've got going on, I think it's cool because it is that like There's so many times in my life, and I'm sitting here in a position where I was telling you earlier, like, I'm looking for what's next for me right now. Like, where am I going next? With everything that I've done and all the places I've been and all the cool shit and people and everything I've met, I'm sitting here and I'm like, where am I going? And I heard this "Don't Die Rusty," and you introduced me to "Don't Die Rusty." I'm
Mhm.
like, it is speaking to me at a you want to talk about timing at a time in my life where I am sitting on the couch a lot and then I am thinking like, what am I going to do next? What's next for Paul? What am I doing? And I feel like I've gotten rusty. I'm like, my body's starting to hurt. I'm 37 years old and I'm like, fuck, why am I waking up and this is hurting and that's hurting? And then I'm like, the answer is I need to go cold plunging. The answer is I got to go get in the sauna. I need to start doing a little more exercise. And like, I'm a deconditioned athlete. So I feel like I can go do certain things and I really can't. And it hurts when I go try to do things that I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that again. Fuck that. Like,
Yeah.
no, thanks. You're laughing.
This
You know
is
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, totally. Like, I woke up this morning and I felt like I had a bender last night, and I'm like, "What? I didn't do anything. I just sat up and worked." So maybe I just had a lack of sleep. I got 6 hours of sleep. Maybe that's what it was. But yeah, just to go back to kind of what you're talking about, I have ADHD too, so I've just been sitting here just like tapping my leg, chomping at the bit to say a word. You're talking about Matt Best, and he also had a gym at one point too, I think, didn't he? He was involved with like a CrossFit gym.
They worked out in a gym. Um, in the early days, you're probably referencing the video, "How to Be a CrossFitter" with Derek Whita?
Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
yep,
'Cause
yep.
I
Yeah.
used to, I don't know, I came across their video one day. I don't know how, I don't know what was going on, but I was looking to get into some sort of gym and I found out there's this one that was pretty close to me. It was like just a mile down the road. And so then I come across his YouTube channel and then I start watching their crazy videos and watching all that. I'm like, man, these guys are wild, and started watching all their stuff. And then just never would have thought that, come 10 years later here, I'm going to be having this conversation with you. And then, at all the Terry Peak or at all the total archery challenges that we've done, we've gotten to know some of the guys from Black Rifle Coffee just from going to those events and everything. But it's just wild how these things kind of come full circle. And then I did want to go back to, and folks, this is the reason why Paul is on the Don't Die Rusty podcast, because I'm glad you brought up the Dakota 5.0, because it was one of the things I wanted to touch on, because it's one of your more recent posts that you put up on Instagram, and talking about how you had a 10-year hiatus from marathon racing, and then you entered the Dakota 5.0, going from the couch to you know right into relentless training and experimenting with all kinds of different stuff. And at the end here, I love what you said. You say, every bit of the pain and struggle was worth it as I pedaled to the finish. Will I do it again? Absolutely. I kind of thrive on the pain, embrace the suffering, and find comfort in pushing my limits. And I love that. That's you not dying rusty. So, you were just talking about how you feel like you're getting rusty, but again, it's those kinds of things, right, that knocks the rust off. And that's why we wanted to have you on the podcast, because like you said, you're sitting there and you're going, man, I can't keep doing this. I need to jump into a cold plunge. I need to, you're constantly trying to come up with ways to get back in the game and knock that rust off. So I absolutely love that. And I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, yeah, that's a lot of people like to say this thing about like, "Oh, you're not starting over, you're starting with experience." I think that applies in a lot of different ways. Going into something that is so high fitness as mountain bike marathon racing is a little bit different. Because I had this mindset. I'm like, you know what? I used to win these races. I'm a state champ. I got the trophy. I got the hardware. I got the fucking records to prove it. I could just show up and I'm gonna finish this race. Absolutely not. The first time I went out to ride that course, 35 miles was smoked, and I wasn't even at a race pace. I was just out of water, couldn't see straight, and I had to ride Tinton back down to town. I'm like, "Oh, Tinton,
Mhm.
it's gonna take me. It's 2 miles, fucking 14 miles of the gravel road," and I was out of water, cramping everywhere, and so this whole "don't die rusty" thing, it does speak to me because I did sit there for a while. I was like, man, I got to do this. Like it's been on my list for many years. I got to do it. And when I wrote that post about getting to the end, like, man, I, I had such high expectations for myself going into the race, and I leveled them real quick after 2 months of training. I was like, all right, I'm not going to be top 10. At first I was like, I can be
Mhm.
top 5. I was there once. Then I started hitting the training after 10-year hiatus, and I'm like, fuck, no, I gotta bring those expectations down because if we're all ADHD, we can attest to like we have these crazy things in our head, and we're going to achieve this,
Mm-hmm.
and then setting a realistic expectation, that can set us back mentally. We're like, I don't know if I can do this, and so getting out there and actually finishing that race with just 3 months of training, and you know, back when I raced full time and I had the commitment to doing it, if I wanted a training program, I had to scour the internet and then I had to print it on paperwork and then I had to make sense of it. And then these days I can plug my Garmin into my bike and I can have a power meter that, it's a tiny little thing that's on the bike and it's not the whole crank set anymore. And I can look at all these different metrics. I can wear the smartwatch now and I've always had a Garmin like Fitbit type
Mm-hmm.
thing, not Fitbit, but like a Garmin version. But like now I can actually tap in and see what my body's doing, and maybe I can biohack my way into finishing this race in the top 10. No, no, you can't. No, absolutely not. You have to put in the fucking hours. Like you're not going to come off the couch in 3 months and win a marathon race. Like I don't even think. Like you look at Lance Armstrong, and I don't care what you say about that guy. He's still a 7-time Tour de France winner.
Yeah.
That guy has never gotten out of shape. But I can only imagine if that guy went 5 years and got back on a bike, I don't think he's going to win the race. I don't think anybody. It's. I don't know. It would be. It's out of the realm of possibility if you're doing it legit. I think.
Well, I think I mean in that situation, I think so too because that's I love watching the Tour de France for some reason. Even though I'm not a even though I'm not a biker in that aspect, but it's the endurance of the Tour de France is amazing to me to watch,
Superhuman.
and then also to watch the teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
The, I mean, it is so interesting. But that's Don't Die Rusty. When it came into my mind, it was like what you're doing is getting off the couch, saying because I'm 55, but I still think I'm 20.
Good.
And even though my knees hurt and my body hurts, I want to keep on doing things because I don't want to. I mean, we talked earlier. I don't want to leave this life thinking I had more in the tank. We'll say I want to leave. I want to leave my body. I want it to be empty. I want to be running on empty in the end. But before I get there, I want to say my life is fulfilled. If I died tomorrow, have I achieved everything I wanted to? No, but if I died tomorrow, would I be fulfilled that I'm at peace with myself? I, you go through life and you figure out that you find that peace within yourself. And now, instead of, I mean, instead of doing the stuff doing it for pain, we'll say, to fix the pain that I had in certain aspects of my life and pushing myself to limits that I love the pain because it was taken away from my mental pain, you know what I mean? Kind of stuff. But now I do the stuff because I feel like I'm achieving something, I'm catching those goals. It's not always for the pain because I always said I would rather take physical pain any day than a mental pain. But now it's about, like, you were looking at the books, it's about becoming more fulfilled.
Yeah, and I've got something to say to that. Like the whole "Don't Die Rusty" thing. If you're 55 and you're moving now, don't stop moving.
No.
Because at 37, after taking 10 years off of movement and like focusing on business stuff and like, oh, I want to grow my financial wealth and oh, I want to, I'm a dad now. I've got a 4-year-old and I didn't ever plan to have kids. And I've got a 4-year-old now too. And that's the interesting thing. I always used to talk like, man, I want to be the dad that could play with his kid. I want to be the dad that's in shape. And then I find myself not being able to keep up with my kid. I'm like, fuck, don't stop moving. That's the secret. Like, if you stop, a body in motion will stay in motion. I know that to be true because getting off the couch and getting back on the bike and going through it, I'm like, man, an hour on this bike, it hurts. It sucks. I used to sit on a bike for 6 hours a day. And now I'm sitting here for an hour thinking, God, this sucks. It hurts. I'm getting off the bike. And I'm like, whoa, I don't remember that. I don't remember that hurting. I'm like, fuck. So my biggest advice on that is just don't stop moving.
Well, I look at you and I look at Ricky, and I've never had kids, so I can kind of see you guys are busy all the time chasing. They're only about this tall. They're only about what, 2 to 3 foot tall, three
Yeah,
foot
yeah,
tall,
counter
but
height.
you
Yeah.
guys are on the run all the time.
Well, Ricky, your dad? How many kids do you have?
Yeah, one of my own. She's 3,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then got 2 stepchildren. Coda, he's 11, and Amaya is 20.
Oh wow. Okay. Good range there. So on the 3-year-old, I've got experience there, and yeah, they have endless energy. Like it's endless until they're out. Like it's
It just doesn't stop. And my daughter, she should be on the Don't Die Rusty podcast because she doesn't. I mean, she's not dying rusty, dude. She is. She jumps off everything. She climbs everything. She is. I mean, people when we go out in public, people kind of freak out because they're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're gonna let your daughter do that." I'm like, she's fine. Even if she hits her head, whatever. It's it's solid. She's bumped it enough. She's built a callus on her skull. She can't break that skull open. But yeah, but it is a different kind of deal, right? Like, um, again, going back to, you were talking about ADHD, and I'm just recently, diagnosed, as of last year.
oh wow, as an adult, so you finally got some answers now. That's really what that means.
Yeah. So it's kind of wild. Like it kind of flipped I kind of figured I probably had it, but just having the awareness, uh, but just, it's different when, if I can be out hiking with her, or running with her, doing something like that, that is amazing. And I'm really excited for when we can do a lot more of that. But right now, like some of the other things, like just like building blocks and doing things like that, like I struggle with that because I'm like, especially when you get it all built up and you're like super hyper focused on it and you get it where you want it. And then she just crushes it. And you're like, no.
And they love that. And they absolutely love to crush it. Like that's their favorite thing to do. Building it's they're like, hurry up and finish it so I can smash it. My son, he's 4. When you get to 4, 3 is fun. Like every year is fun. Every year builds on the last year of fun, on the fun meter, if we will. And like my little guy is 4.5 now. And yeah, he's got his own personality, he's talking and everything like that. And when you get to that next level, there's something else there. Like it taps for me with an ADHD brain, and I look at my kid, I'm like, there's a good chance he's going to have it. It's when you're neurodivergent, as they call it, it passes on to the kids most of the time. And I'm like, man, when I was growing up, I didn't really have anybody that I felt like could get on my level of my ability to dissect something so quickly, figure it out, get the nuts and bolts out of it, and then whatever's fluff, move on from that. It's stupid. I don't care about it, but I want to focus on this. And I think having like I'm seeing my kid, I'm like, shit, man, that's a lot of my. I feel like that's a lot of me there, even now as an adult. And you tell that to some people, and they look at you like, yeah, well, that's a toddler. They're supposed to do that. You're like, no, no, that's how my brain is functioning right now. And like I do a really good job of getting by, but that's how my brain's functioning. You're telling me it's not supposed to be like that?
Mhm.
ADHD is wild. When you really crack into like a neurotypical. So I've gotten really big into Andrew Huberman, or it is, yeah, Andrew Huberman,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
Huberman Labs, and listening to him thanks to Joe Rogan, and I've gotten onto the Huberman side of the house where I'm like, fuck, I want to know more about ADHD and my brain, and how it's so different from normal people's brain. Normal, I'm gonna do normal like that, like a neurotypical brain processes time different. Like I have zero concept of time.
That's interesting because I was listening. Go ahead.
Time blindness.
Yep. Dude, if I don't see it, it doesn't exist. That's I'm so far from my family down in El Paso, Texas, and like I've lived in multiple states. I've lived across the country, and I've got a bunch of different friend groups all over the nation. And like I forget people exist. It's the weirdest thing. But then when I see them again, I'm like, "Oh, how's it going?" And like it's like I was just hanging out with them yesterday.
What you're talking about, I'm looking up right now because I listened to a podcast yesterday, which was very interesting about the brain.
Oh
So it's
man.
kind of interesting. We're talking about this, but I'll find it here.
The brain's a wild place. And like learning more and more about ADHD. I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast this far, you'd see like I can, with an ADHD brain, you can go from it's just like these long tangents. Like we want to give you all the information to get to the end point.
Have you heard of Jim Quick?
I'm not.
he fell on a grate when he was young, and
Fell in a grate.
like a heater grate in a
Okay.
house, and that's when he supposedly changed his, like he was energetic. Probably he was a young kid, fell on this grate, and he changed his, like he it took a hard time to learn,
Hmm.
and now he's one of the like top. He talks about the brain. He's like he had a hard time learning, but he learned differently, and now he's talking about he's done this for 30 years and studied the brain, which is it was just interesting because I'm going, some of those things are me.
Yeah, I'm not a medical guy at all, but I've got ADHD and I've got a smartphone,
Yeah.
and that's what I say. If there's something I want to know, I can figure it out real fast. And you want to talk about the brain? When I was young, I would sit there and I would watch X Games,
Yeah.
completely captivated by like Bucky Lasek and Travis Pastrana. And I could remember where I was when these guys pulled off, their epic wins or their double backflip, or um, the one of my biggest ambitions when I was younger was to go and be involved in X Games and get to meet some of these guys, my heroes, if you will. And I did. I did just that thanks to social media. Like I got to meet Bucky Lasek and I got to hang out with him. I actually I still have my X Games credentials from a year I ran athlete support with him at X Games. And then I got to meet Travis Pastrana. Same crazy story about social networking and social media, and like introducing him to Jared Taylor, and like crazy cool shit like that. But something that I've always been interested in is the brain aspect, because you go back to the late Dave Mirra and you look at Dave Mirra and he was the golden boy on a bike in X Games and just fucking stomping. And then he late in his life went to running Ironman triathlons and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And I met Dave a couple times through the rallycross circuit, and he when I saw him start training for, like, he was boxing and then he started training into the Ironman stuff. That's when I was real big into marathon races and whatnot. And then you go and you see the guy, and you see what happens, and he takes his own life. And then they find out that, post-mortem they diagnose him with CTE, what is a chronic traumatic encephalitis, and youngest guy to be diagnosed with it. And then you see some of the NFL players and you start thinking like, fucking brain, dude.
Mhm.
And so you see all these action sports stars, and like I got close to quite a few of them. It was a big ambition of mine, and I
Mhm.
and and I have this perspective, time blindness we'll talk about, but I have this perspective where I've seen them, and then I see them again a year later, and I'm like, oh wow, I can see some things have changed. Oh, I could see, again, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not trained or anything like that, but I could see some psychological changes in some of these people, where I'm like, I'm wondering, like one of the most recent athlete I worked with, he's an off road racer. They're running through the desert at high speeds, and all the shock coming through, and like
Mhm.
you wonder, like, the brain and how much of these impacts and what does it do. And I have my own TBI. I cracked my head open when I was 15 riding a motorcycle. Like, I crashed a quad, I cracked my head open, I was unconscious. I think they call it a coma for 3 or 4 days in the hospital. I was in a level 1 intensive care. Broke both my ankles.
Jeez.
I was in a wheelchair for 6 months. Fucking sucked.
That would suck.
Yeah, you learn a lot about being in a wheelchair. Like, you can only see people's crotches. But um, at any rate, you want to talk about the brain, and then you start thinking like, "Fuck, I still got the knot back here. Is that starting to leach into my life? Is that starting to become a problem?" And I see all these people that were in action sports and they've taken hit after hit after hit, and you're like, brain science is crazy, and I think we're only at the very beginning of understanding the brain and how it works. So everybody's trying to like biohack and crack the code on how do I get, stem cells or peptides, or what am I going to get to help my brain fire a little bit better? Because as we get older, everything's degenerating. And it's like some of us are probably degenerating a little bit faster with hits to our head. I don't know. But
And you'll have to listen to that because actually they were talking about that yesterday, and they're saying that yes, we do as we do get older, but it's also said that like it's also how we learned. So people think as you get older, it's like we learn at a little slower pace. It was interesting to
I think
me.
you do pick up things when you're older. It takes a little longer. But go back to being a kid, and there's science that states the synapses in the brain build a lot faster when you're learning, having fun.
Hmm.
If you learn something new while playing, the brain fires faster and it builds those pathways faster. So if you're being forced to learn something in the environment where you're sitting at a desk, you're going to be slower. Or if you're learning something, I don't know. So I don't know if it's just as adults we're not having as much fun when we're learning something, or we're harder on ourselves, maybe a little more critical. If we can't, like bow and arrow, for example, you guys are both big archers.
Hmm.
I got into the bow and arrow a couple years ago. Black Rifle got me a compound bow, and that's a sad story behind that too, where it got stolen. But at any rate, trying to pick that up and being so hard on myself, like, how can I not do this? How am I not? And then you find out like there's so many intricacies with shooting a compound bow, and like you have to do the reps. You can't, again, it's like the mountain biking. You can't just go and I can't go down bag one of those mountain goats that you have just
No,
on sheer luck, thinking I can do it.
no, and Ricky, this is it's which is interesting is because that's where I first met Paul. We went to a local 3D shoot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
with
right.
Jesse you were talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that was crazy.
So so I wanted to touch a little bit on some of the stuff we're talking about, because we're talking about ADHD and then we're talking about Andrew Huberman and so many different things, right? And
Hmm.
this is crazy because and Rick's, I think he might be in denial, but he's got ADHD too. I'm convinced. So here you got here you
I,
got here you
Yeah,
got three dudes with ADHD here trying to have a conversation. So this thing's gonna go everywhere. There's trains leaving the station in all directions,
all
folks. So
directions.
yep. But so going back to the what you were talking about, Andrew Huberman talks a lot about neuroplasticity.
Yep.
And uh, what's again, you said we still don't know a lot about the brain, right? And especially like with ADHD, we're learning there's so much more knowledge about it now than there was like when you were originally diagnosed, right? Like the first instinct was to give you or not Adderall, but Ritalin,
Ritalin.
right?
Ugh.
Uh, and I had a buddy that was diagnosed and he was given Ritalin as well. But in any case, so now our 11-year-old, he has it as well, but he's also got a few other things. He's got dyslexia and what is it? I can't remember what the other thing is, but he's got a little bit of a short fuse. You know what I mean? Like if things are not to the schedule, if things do not follow the pattern of what he's typically used to, it really throws him off. And so he's going through this program, and it's called Brain Balance, and they actually have this program for adults as well. But he's going through this program, and they do these exercises, and they're just like these really mundane, kind of boring exercises that he absolutely hates doing them. You know, it's like you put classical music on in the background, and then he does like push-ups, and he's got to have this little thing on his wrist and that kind of pulses, and so there's all these different exercises that he has to do, but it works. It's actually whatever it's doing is it's flexing a muscle in his brain that he's not flexing on a daily basis, and then somehow it's creating this, you know, release of chemical in his brain that allows the frontal cortex of his brain, where your executive functioning is, it allows that to function at a higher level. And suddenly he now has, more empathy, and he, is more aware of his actions prior to doing them, where before he just kind of haphazardly would do something. And then it's one of those things where you're like, well, why would you do that? And then he doesn't have a response for it, right? And so you can probably relate to this, Paul. When you were a kid, if you did something, adults were probably like, why would you do that? And then you would get in trouble, right? But you really
Hmm.
legitimately have no idea
Hmm.
why you did that. You don't know. Just and you say
I mean,
that, but then
I mean,
they're
you,
like, well, they think you're just trying to be defiant or something like that. So it's wild how what we're learning about the brain and how it can, you can mold it, and you can teach it new things.
yeah, even as an adult, I find myself in those situations where I'm like, why the fuck did I just do that? Like, why would I? And the impulsivity, like the lack of impulsive control and executive dysfunction, it's very real for an ADHD. Or like, I've got Adderall in my cabinet, and I recently went back a couple years ago because I started seeing a trend in my adult life where I'm like, every 2 years there's like a cycle, and I saw the trend in relationships with women, and so my most recent relationship with my son's mother, it went the same way as the other ones. And I'm like, what the fuck is it's something I gotta work, I gotta figure something out. So I went and I sat down with a psychologist, and you know, Western medicine is throw pills at it. Like, let's not try to figure it out. Let's just give you something. And I went in and they put me on Adderall, and I've got it. And I started small. I took 5 milligram Adderall doses, and I'm like, all right, 5 milligram can put me in a different mood. And so I went up to 10 and these extended release ones. And I'm like, I hated Ritalin. Absolutely hated it. It made me a zombie. I didn't put on any weight. I was always picked on for being scrawny in school and whatever. And so this Adderall, though, I get on it, I'm like a fucking zombie again. I'm like I can think clear trains of thoughts, and I can understand certain things a little bit differently. But then, yeah, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I like this. Like, I don't like how I feel on this. But I can, we talk about the trains leaving the station there in like so many different directions, and that's crazy because that's like many times I talk really fast because my brain is processing so many different things at once and like understanding, trying to like talk to the end of that and talk to the end of. So coming back to you saying, "Oh, I just did something and I couldn't tell you why I did it." Fuck, man, that happens a lot as an adult. It's we just I think as you get older with ADHD, and if you're recently a year into being diagnosed ADHD, you might start to backtrack and think, "Oh man, I don't know why I did that." And then you can go back and say, "Well, I am ADHD and I didn't mean to do that. Definitely wasn't on my mind to do it that way, but I just did. I just did it. Like it felt good. It was chasing the dopamine." It's
Well, and that's why I that's why I was kind of laughing when Ricky said that, because I have a lot of I don't know why I did that moments.
Well, you went and you bought everything for Don't Die Rusty. And the moment you told me that earlier, you're like,
Yeah.
I'm doing this backwards. I'm like, holy shit, this guy's got ADHD. He doesn't know it, but he's got it. Because the same dude, I own so many fucking domains.
Yeah.
I have all these like I've got a notebook of shit that I'm like, I'm gonna launch this brand, I'm gonna do this, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that, and I'm gonna do this. And then yeah, I get GoDaddy.com, your domain's expiring. I'm like, well, do I want to keep that one or not? Is
Yeah.
that one, with the gatekeeping of the internet? Like maybe somebody wants this one. What's the value? I don't know.
No, I hear you there. That's where, and that's it. But I do like, why did I do that? Kind of thing. And I was just laughing at that because I've been there, done that, and I still do that.
Shit, man. Every so often I do something wild. I'm like, huh.
That's why this is bald, or why did I do that? You know what I mean?
What's crazy is so skydiving, I started jumping like in 2009. I went as a static line jumper for my first ever skydive, which they hook up a parachute and like you go through some ground school and they teach you how to position your body, and then you go up to what 3,000 feet and you climb out and you hang off the wing strut of a Cessna 172, fucking hanging on the side of the airplane. Well, anyway, I got my skydiving license and I started jumping, and I jumped on a somewhat irregular basis. I'd go out there when I felt like I needed to get closer to Lena. Like I was like, that's how I'm gonna get closer to her. I'm
Mhm.
gonna go fucking 10,000 feet in the air, and I'm gonna jump out of an airplane and be close. The crazy thing about skydiving was that, man, it knocked the ADHD out. Like it was gone. I'd go up in an airplane and I'd be like, be able to get out of the airplane and you're falling through the earth or through the atmosphere. You're like, I don't complete quiet. Because you know this, Ricky, your brain with ADHD is constantly firing on everything that's going on. Like, I can't go to a bar and have a conversation because I'm too busy with the noises. Like, I'm so distracted. I can hear everybody's conversation in the bar except for the person I'm sitting with.
Hmm.
And I'm way more interested in what's going on over here than the person I'm sitting with. But at the same time, if that person I'm sitting with and I go to Six Flags and we can walk around Six Flags together, I can have a great conversation. I'm completely tuned in. And there's still all sorts of crazy shit going on. But in a bar environment, man, the sound's bouncing off the walls and I'm, pinging here and there and the brain is constantly, but skydiving, as crazy as it sounds, as soon as that door opens on the aircraft and the wind rushes in, quiet. That's the craziest thing you can do I think, outside of base jumping, maybe as a human. But I'll tell you what, man, when that door opens, you climb out of an airplane, you're like, oh, it's gone. And for an ADHD brain, you can't put a price on that because it's so I keep track of my vitals. I'm constantly keyed in like, something that I don't know that medical science is caught up with ADHD is our nervous system is completely out of whack. And if you wear a Whoop strap or you wear an Apple Watch or a Garmin, your metrics are all over the place.
Hmm.
And I can sit here and say, well, I'm running in the red. I don't feel like it. Shit, my body must be running in the red. And like you can't quiet the noise no matter what. Even on Adderall, the noise doesn't goes away a little bit, but it's still there. But you climb out of an airplane and yeah, it's gone.
And maybe that's where I'm not jumping out of the plane, but I'm saying maybe that's why I don't know about Ricky too, but I get the peace in the mountains by myself.
Yeah, very well
Because
put.
there's no, there's Mother Nature is bouncing off you, but you don't have the voices bouncing off you. Because the more you talk like this, is because I can hear other conversations in the bar too, and it's like I get crazy. Like I'm talking to you, and then I'm hearing this conversation over there, and I'm going, "You guys are idiots." You know what I mean? It's like I want to turn around and say, "You guys are idiots. That's not right." But and I'm supposed to be talking to you, but I hear that and I go, and it's like, say we're at a tack or something, and we're at the after party, and people are talking about hunting or this and that, and I'm going, "What the hell are you doing?" And you're stupid. You know what? I want to say that to him, but I'm talking to Ricky, but I hear this over here. I'm going, I need to focus, Rick.
It's tough. It's tough, and
Yeah.
it's cool that you got
Yeah.
diagnosed. Like on Instagram, you can find people that have been diagnosed as an adult. Like I've known I've had it since I was a kid. Admittedly, while when I was running my own businesses and off doing my own thing, it wasn't until my son's mother and the relationship started to fall apart with her, um, and on top of that, watching Black Rifle go from startup to more of a corporate environment and starting to work with more corporate America, that I started realizing, like, I'm not the same. I'm so different, and the way my brain so Instagram is a big resource of ADHDers because there's so many creative people out there in this world, and the more creatives I surround myself, the more I'm like, I start finding out you're not just ADHD, you're autistic too, or it's dual, kind of, they go hand in hand, and you start to get a lot of answers, I think, as an adult.
Yeah, it's the awareness has really been a game changer for me. I mean, honestly, I don't. Part of the reason that I started podcasting again is, part of that I actually started. Well, okay, all kinds of trains leaving right now, but you were talking earlier about relationships and like with my wife, that's where it all started. We're just having struggles, and part of it is, like you were saying before, is I'm looking at her and we're having a conversation, and meanwhile my daughter's over here doing this and our son's over here doing that, and all I can focus on is what's going on. I can't even see them, like, with my eyes, but I can see them with my brain doing things, and I'm completely distracted by that. And then it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart. Can you repeat the last minute of what you just said? I didn't hear any of that. I'm so sorry." And it's really hard she's an empath, so it's really difficult for her, even though she knows that I have it. It's just, it gets to the point where she's like, "Well, why even tell you if you know what I mean? Like, why tell you the story of my day or whatever it's going to be, because you may not hear it." And then, so it's like, okay, I got to get to the bottom of this. You know what I mean? Because I can't. And I always suspected that I had some form of ADD or ADHD or something. And so, yeah, went in and got diagnosed. And again, like I said, it's been a game changer as far as, like, even at work. I think about how much further I could probably be in my career if I had that awareness, because I could never explain why it's so hard for me to, like, it's really easy for me to start a project. I can start 100 projects in a day, but I won't finish any of them. You know what I mean? Because you get the dopamine rush of starting something, and then you get into the meat and into the dirt of it, and you're like, man, this isn't fun anymore. I don't want to do this.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah, totally.
like with podcasting, it's been wild. It's like, I love every second of it, even right down to the editing part of it, the technology part of it. Like, sure, there's days where I'm just like, oh man, I'm really not feeling it. But as soon as I sit down and I start editing, or I start writing, or I start talking, it's like, man, this is it. This is awesome. I love this. So just having these conversations is a dopamine hit for me.
To me, it's a conversation too. I mean, this is, we were talking earlier. I mean, I have all those ideas that I had, like I was telling you about Don't Die Rusty going all in, but I had Project Rick, I had all these domains too. And it's like, I had all these dreams of going and doing this stuff, but Don't Die Rusty, I finally focused on. And I said, this means something to me. And I'm all in on this. But I had to focus. I had to say, this is what I want, and this is what you're going to do. And when we're with us doing these podcasts and these episodes, I love these conversations because I learn from you, and it comes into in all conversations you learn from somebody something. I hope because that's what we're hoping that somebody gets that aha moment and they have that. I'm not going to die rusty. I'm going to go do this or that, but learning and focusing and like I'm learning from you guys right now. Like the train's leaving the station or whatever you want to say, but I I've known that stuff, but I've never focused on that stuff, you know? Like, I I've been lucky to have a wife that that can handle my we'll be driving down the road, and I'll be having a conversation in my head, and I'll start talking, and she says, like, "What are you talking about?" And we were talking about Ashley earlier, and she's like my translator when I'm talking to people if my wife's not there because that's just Rick.
Yeah, there's something there about, like all these different projects going on and finding the one thing that really pulls you in the most and like your dopamine hits on it the hardest. And I used to call it shiny object syndrome. I got a room full of hobbies. All right. I got the craziest hobbies and like the weirdest shit. And like you find these things every once in a while and you chase it because you're like, oh, this feels great. I love this. Like I'm ADHD, you have you're missing dopamine. You don't have as much dopamine
Hmm.
uptake. Your receptors are different. And so like you can get a flood of dopamine off so many different ways. And like, I love Las Vegas for one. You were just in Las Vegas. Like, I
Yeah.
love Las Vegas because the lights and the energy and everything I feed off of that and it fuels me. And then my ADHD here in Spearfish, South Dakota, it's dude, I'm fucking dying most of the time. I just feel like, and it's crazy because a lot of people will be like, you're in the Black Hills, dude. It's beautiful there. How are you struggling? I'm like, because it's not, there's not enough energy for me around here.
Hmm.
It's not hitting. But when it comes to like chasing down these dopamine things, what people aren't talking about is what happens when you get that thing you've been chasing and you have this preconceived notion about what it's going to be. And then you get there and you kind of do hear this a lot in corporate America where people go to school for 4 years or 6 or 8 years to be a medical doctor. And then they get to where they thought they wanted to be. And they're like, this sucks, but I'm in so much debt. I can't go elsewhere. I'm
Hmm.
stuck. Like for an ADHD brain, back when I had these lofty goals of going to X Games and meeting these people and being involved in motorsports and running a motorsports program and doing all these different things. Nobody talks about when you get there and then what you do afterwards. When like you get there and you're like, this ain't what I thought it was. Or you see we have this perspective with ADHD, like there's this intuition process where we can snuff out the fucking people in the room that are snakes real fast. We can tell the people that come in with ulterior motives real fast. Like there's this Instagram meme or this TikTok meme I see about like always have an ADHD friend when meeting people because they'll tell you real quick if that person's legit or not. Like we can recognize patterns so fast in people that we can tell like, oh, you're full of shit. Oh, everybody likes you, but I could see right through you. So where I'm going with this is when you get to that certain point, like I put certain people on pedestals and then I got real close to those certain people and I was like, woof, woof, like this is all fucking show. This is all facade. And yeah, I do a lot of dumb shit, but I do have some morals and I do have ethics and I do look at some stuff and like our our justice meter, if you will, our social justice meter as an ADHD is very high. Where like if somebody's being wrong, we feel really strong about that, and we get really pissed off. And so like getting to certain places in my life where I always wanted to be, and then I'm sitting there, I'm like, fuck this, no thanks. Like this is grimy. I want nothing to do with this area that I'm in. Like it's it's taxing because then that that messes you up on a personal level where we feel rejection very strong too. And like there's just certain things that we feel super strong about. And then you get to a certain level and you're like, I always wanted to be here, but not like this. Like I didn't think it was this way. I didn't think it was so negative and toxic. And you're doing this, but you're doing this with that person, but you don't really like that person. And I know because you confide in me for some strange fucking reason. And now I have to sit here with all of you in the room and like, why are you even going? Why are you even doing this if you don't like this person? It's weird. So you get to a certain spot and you're like, nope, 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 not doing this anymore. I want something else now. I think that's where I'm at right now, by the way.
Yep.
This whole what's next for me.
Yep.
I've seen too much. I've peeked behind
Oh.
too many curtains. And I'm like, yeah, no.
I laughed because I thought maybe you were saying, you're reading the people in the room right now, and you're like, man, these people are not all they're cracked up to be. These two Ricks, man, I don't know. I'm out.
No, I'm vibing with you guys. I'm not talking about you guys in this. I'm talking about some other
I
people.
know.
And like,
But
I don't like to talk bad about people. That's another problem I have. I don't like to. I don't like to. I like. I generally won't say something online that I wouldn't say to a person in their face. And a lot of times too, like the things I know about the people I know and some of the places I've been, and it's better that I just keep that shit here.
Yep.
It's their business. It's nobody else's business.
Yep.
And I'm not the person that needs to go talk about it. You know, if you believe in karma, in due time, the people that do wrong, karma will fucking come around if you believe it, you know, and I think sitting here with you guys, I'm vibing with you guys. Like I can keep having a conversation with you guys because this is fun.
It is, and that's kind of funny because I've seen a lot. We see a lot in social media where it's easy to tear people down. It's hard to bring them up.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of there's things that people don't need to know. I don't care if somebody was doing whatever. That's their life.
Don't air that shit out on social media.
Yeah.
You only do that. There's this thing like circle of trust, and you know, you get into some circles of trust, and you see some things that nobody ever needs to fucking see, and you're just like, all right, I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna keep that. And then sometimes I see people on the internet like air their grievances, and I'm like, what are you doing? You're not thinking ahead of what you're doing right now, because if you know, like the circles I've been around and been involved with and have been with professionally, if I were to say a word about some of the shit I know, I'd never have a job in the industry ever again, in any of the industries I've been involved in. And so you look at people that get on the internet and say these things and then put it out there in public. Once it's there, you cannot get it back. Once it's there, it's fucking there. It's been screenshot 100 times before you can delete it. I guarantee it. If you're a person of certain status, and you see some grievances on the internet, you're like, oof, nobody's ever going to let you in the room again.
That's going to leave a mark.
Yep,
What I think,
that's going to keep you away from doing whatever you want to do next.
Because I've had people talk to me and say things, and it's like about 3 or 4 months later, there's somebody else was, did you hear that? And
I hate gossip.
I do too.
Fucking
I hate
gossip.
it because there's things I don't. There's like I said, I hate gossip. I don't need to hear these things because people can talk to you, and if they have a trust with you, why would you gossip?
Yeah, we can talk about this. We can go in circles all night on this. And trains going, leaving the station, and stuff like that. But gossip's one of those. The internet has conditioned people to say things that they would never say in front of you.
Yep.
Because they're protected by this screen and you know, even anonymity,
Yeah.
anonymous, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, you're yeah. So many people will sit there and keyboard warrior it up, and then you're just like, you let's have that conversation in person. I mean, for instance, I was recently involved in off-road racing, and somebody was talking all sorts of shit on the internet. Like they were just going off. So at the race, I was team director. We roll up to this other team. They're some junior varsity league team in the series, and we're the fucking pros. And we just roll over there like, "Hey, what's up, dog? Like, you guys are spouting off on the internet, and you're fucking spreading these stupid memes. Like, we're here. Let's have a conversation." And the guy no shit puts it on his wife and says, "Oh, my wife had my phone and was into the booze last night." And I'm like, "You're gonna put this on your wife, bro? Just fuck, man. Just delete your Instagram. If you're gonna sit here and be a keyboard warrior, just get rid of it." But to put it on your, I was dumbfounded. I was absolutely dumbfounded by that. I was like, I came over here thinking we're gonna fight, and you're gonna sit here and blame it on your wife. Cool, man. Like, that's it. That was the last time they got any bit of our energy.
If I did that, I'd probably be walking funny the next day if my wife found out that I was blaming her for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy what the internet's done to people.
I love what you said about the intuition thing, because Rick and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago, and you know, we're going down the list. We talk 3-4 times a week, and we're going down the list of people that we want to have conversations with. And there's a few out there that I'm like, well, I don't know this guy very well, but he might have something to say. What do you think about this guy? And Rick's kind of like, well, I don't know. He's this, and he said this thing to me once, and I'm not really sure about that guy. And I go, well, hey, dude, I'm like, I don't know. I'm convinced that you have ADHD. And if you do, and you have the same intuition that I do, all you have to do is tell me that you don't feel good about that person, and I believe it, because we do. There's something about that. Like, you can pick someone in the room almost immediately. Sometimes the first thing that comes out of their mouth, and you're like, And in the past, I've kind of written off some people probably a little bit too quickly, because then after I got to know them a little bit more, then I was like, all right, they're not as bad as they seem to be. So I'm a little more careful with that. But at the same time, yeah, now we've got a list of people we definitely don't want to talk to. And we both trust each other's opinions on who we think is good and who isn't good. So
Yeah, the intuition is wild, man. And there's been times where it's been pinging on me, and I'm like, God, it's going off so hard. But I go against the grain, and I'm like, nah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna befriend them. I'm gonna get closer to them. And then I'm just like, fuck, why did I do that? Like, I should have just left that alone. I should have trusted my gut. The intuition with ADHD. I mean, I only know what I know. And I can't speak on a neurotypical brain and how they react to certain people, but like some people just I can't even be in the same room as them. I just if they're in the room, not only if I'm my intuition is pinging on that person the way like I can vibe and feel like, oh, there's something off there. The first time I'm in the room with them, I'm like, all right, whatever. Like I'll say something like, something's off, whatever. But then like if I'm in the room a second time or a third time or a fourth time with that same person in the room, then I get to a point where I'm closed off from the entire room because I'm like, I cannot fucking talk in front of this person. They are they are that bad. And you guys don't see it. And I on the other hand, I'm not gonna pull people aside to a certain extent and be like, that person, there's something. This happened very recently. This happened very recently, and I'm not gonna say names or anything like that, but somebody was into something for some wild personal gain, and somebody else could not see it at all. And I had to sit there and bite the bullet and watch what was going to happen. And I knew it was going to happen well in advance of it happening, and it happened. And then on the back end, I was like, I fucking told you. And they're like, yeah, I should have listened. I'm like, you had to figure it out for yourself, bud. I gave you all the information. I told you how I felt. Brought facts even. You had to see it for yourself because sometimes that happens. But then we look like the asshole in the beginning if you go and try and tell somebody. I got in a relationship, I got in trouble for telling somebody that like, hey, your sister's boyfriend is a fucking scumbag. Like there's something there that's off. Like that's not a good thing. And I got ripped. And they're like, you just like to stir the pot and start shit and blah blah. I'm like, no, no, no. I'm not I'm there's something that you don't know about this person and they haven't shown it yet, but it's coming. Like I can tell you, I've seen this person a million times over. Like I can tell you. And then like 3 months later, it unfolds the way I thought it was. I was like, I told you. And starts the cycle all over again.
mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting because I started my job, and I had one of my workers quit, and then he messaged me about 6 months later, and I hemmed and hawed about should we rehire him, and because he didn't leave on a good, he kind of did it wrong, but he's young, and I hemmed and hawed for about a week, just thinking, and then I went and asked the other people in the play. I asked the closer people what they thought, because I said I have this feeling and I think we should hire him back, and I think I would keep him on a short leash, and we'll see where this goes. And I had this meeting with some of the other coworkers, and then the other people that didn't know, they said, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, well, I have this feeling, and then now he's awesome.
I thought this was going a different direction. I was waiting for. I was like, oh, he proved you right.
No, my intuition was right on judging him. That's what I'm saying.
That's good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Because how many times do we walk in the room and see the bad person?
All the time.
But to see the good in a person, I'm just saying it was interesting.
Yeah, I think it does work two ways. The intuition road is definitely a two-way road. I saw this person on the internet, and this is an interesting thing being a marketer and looking for next level talent, like finding people that are undiscovered. Like you always hear these conversations or see these stories about, like Eminem, for example. He was discovered just by happenstance after going to like a rap battle,
Mhm.
and you pattern recognition in ADHD is huge. Intuition is huge, but like finding somebody that is not yet discovered and then putting them in the right environment for them to be discovered, there's something there too. That happened recently where I brought somebody to a big time event and I put them in a car. I helped get them some sponsorship money. And just today I saw this person hanging out with an absolute rock star in Leticia Buffoni, the Red Bull skateboarder. I see this person that I walked into a certain room and I see them off doing cool shit. And I'm like, that's what's up. Like that's what's up. You had a big platform on TikTok and then put you in the right environment, and it feels good when when the stars do align.
And that's what I'm saying. It
Yeah.
feels good. I mean, we see a lot of the like Ricky and Ricky talked. There's people that I'm not going to talk to. I don't care if we became really big. I'm just saying, and I don't want to talk to him.
Yeah, that's good. I think you have to stick to that. I think you cannot force a conversation if you don't want to have a conversation with somebody like that. And are you going to sit here and have that conversation? Like how man, painstaking is that going to be?
It'd be like cutting out my heart.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been sitting here for a long time and it doesn't even feel like we've been talking for a long time.
Yeah, no, I keep looking. I'm like, how long are we going to go? I keep talking.
I'm good. I don't know about Ricky, but I'm good, you know.
Like we got to bring this back to Don't Die Rusty.
Yes.
Was there like kind of a more poignant moment? Is there something that you want to like kind of strictly point out or just like reflect on from the episode?
Elena, that one struck him. That Elena is the one that has directed him most of his life without her being here.
Yeah.
When he got on the mountain bike with the grief, became the mountain biker he is, who gave him the connections to keep getting connections, to keep moving in the direction he was going. I mean, that's my poignant moment in looking at what drove him.
I like the way that you said that, and how wild is it that, you know, we discover that two of us are definitely diagnosed ADHD. We suspect that you, Rick, probably have ADHD. And so then that conversation could have easily gotten derailed, right? But we managed to reel it in and keep it flowing well. And so I'm pretty impressed with the way that we did all of that and the way that we put that together, for sure.
We're creating a family. The more the family grows, the more we grow. Don't die rusty.